Hello there, today I am here to do the second half of my June reading wrap up. I'm not gonna lie, this is probably gonna be like the shortest wrap up ever. Honestly, we got a PlayStation and I've been playing that a bit, which has been quite nice, and also we've been in the process of trying to buy a house. Now I know people say that buying a house is stressful. I didn't realise how stressful it would be how early on. I was imagining like the actual moving process was stressful. No, the finding the house, the dealing with the mortgage, all that jazz is really stressful. So I've kind of only been thinking about that. There were a good few nights this week where I was just so unbelievably stressed. All I could do was just look at houses online. It was horrible. I've slowly been getting back into reading. I picked up like 3 books and I just couldn't concentrate on them. So I ended up going for something that I knew was going to be quite a fast read, and that kind of helped me to get back into reading. But I've had a pretty slow half of the month, although we did go on holiday for 1 week of this half of the month. So yeah, it was horrible. It was kind of like relaxing holiday and then suddenly back to all this stress. However, I did read a really long book on holiday, so that's good. So let's get straight into it. The first book, and the book that I read while I was on holiday, is The Mad Ship by Robin Hobb. This is the second in the Live Ship Traders trilogy, which the first of which, The Ship of Magic, I think it's called, I read a few months ago. Now I never do this with fantasy. I never pick one up straight after finishing the other. I usually have to leave it for at least a year because I don't like to kind of rehash things, and this is the first time ever really that I have picked up a second in the trilogy quite soon after, and I think there's benefits to doing that and there's minus points. So the benefit was that I was really fresh with the characters. I was really ready to just jump straight in. I think if I had left it a year, I would have been a little bit confused as to who the characters were and reminding myself what had gone on, because this is not a book that kind of explains what's happened, which is good because it's annoying when a second book is just spending the whole time explaining what happened in the first one. But I think it would have been confusing for me if I hadn't read it so soon after. That said, it is a big book. Excuse this, it got messed up in the car when I was on holiday. Ugh. It's a big book, and the other one was a big book, so I think I also by the end of this one kind of was a bit tired of the world, but I'm still really enjoying the trilogy. So these are books set in a kind of fantasy world, but it's not unreachable fantasy, I don't think. Like, I'm not personally a huge fantasy fan, but I can really get behind these because the main sort of magic in this fantasy world is that there are ships called live ships, which are made from this magical wood, which after 3 owners have died on its deck from the same family, they basically develop, they don't come alive necessarily, but they develop the ability to talk, and they're sort of the bits on the end, the masthead I suppose it's called, becomes animated, and it is able to connect with another living member of the family and sort of share memories and thoughts and feelings. So the ships aren't alive exactly, but they are animated and they have human qualities, and they are also, you know, pretty much indestructible unless you set them on fire. They're the best ships, and this basically looks at issues surrounding the town where these live ships come from and the relationship that this town have with the people who supply the live ships. It also looks at a pirate who is trying to overtake live ships. Obviously I don't want to say what happens in this one because I don't want to ruin it, but it predominantly follows the family of one live ship called the Vivacia, and we are following her journey and the journey of the people in her family. It is really enjoyable, really fast-paced. I really enjoyed having this on holiday, actually. It was, and that's why I wanted to take it. I think it was absolute escapism, and as I say, I really enjoyed it. Probably I didn't get kind of bored of it until I got to about here, and that's a lot, you know, and I was reading it quite quickly. I was spending most of my days reading it, so it's not surprising that I got a little bit sick of it in the end. However, I will definitely be looking forward to picking up the next one, and I would really recommend Robin Hobb if you're not the hugest fantasy fan but you want something that's just a little bit different. Then is when, you know, my reading kind of went downhill. I picked up loads of different books and just none of them were hitting the spot. But I finally got around to When Breath Becomes Air by Pt.2, I think is his name. This is a short little book. I knew it wasn't going to take me very long. It's quite a little book as well, so I picked it up. I have to say, this edition I adore. I've been having this book on my radar for a long time, and I picked this up in a little bookshop in Glastonbury, which they always seem to have really different editions. I don't know whether they're American editions, but they're a fantastic bookshop because they have all these like editions of books that I don't necessarily see elsewhere, and they're all really cheap because they're basically books, I think, that have had damage or small things done to them. So some of them will have like little tears in the covers, or this one for example has a red dot on it, but I think I picked this up for like £3. It's a beautiful edition. It's even got deckled edges, and as I say, I haven't seen this anywhere. Presumably it is the American version because it's got American pricing in it. But yeah, love this edition. I would definitely recommend, if you're in Glastonbury, checking that bookshop out. I can't remember what it's called because I'm useful, but it's the only bookshop there, I think, that is not spirituality based. So yes, there's this one. Now this is a book that's been around for a while now. It follows Pt.2, who was training to be a neurosurgeon. He was just about to finish his residency when he was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he wrote a book basically about his experience with that before his death. And going into this, I knew it was going to be sad. Obviously it was going to be sad. It's a man writing about his death basically, and it was sad, but it wasn't as sad as I thought. I think what really hit me was the end section, because the afterword is written by his wife, and it kind of outlines what happened during his death, and kind of his final words and things like that, and that kind of got to me, especially because I think probably it was a bit fresh to pick this up because I had a bereavement last year, and it wasn't cancer, that wasn't cancer, but the end of life setting and the situation and everything that happened at the end of his life was very reminiscent of the bereavement I had last year. So it was quite difficult to read, and that kind of hit me in the chest a lot, and left me feeling a little bit uncomfortable and a little bit negative. Not that it's a negative on the book, obviously that's part and parcel of a book like this, but it did leave me feeling a little bit. So I think if you have had a bereavement recently, perhaps give this one a miss for now, but other than that, it's a really enjoyable book. I think Pt.2 is really a fascinating man in that he very much looked at how his being a neurosurgeon affected him in terms of his cancer journey, and how it both made it easier for him to face death and made it harder because he knew what was coming. He had seen the same thing happen to his patients. And he's also fascinating in that he studied English literature, and he was very interested in the more philosophical side of how our brains work through his literature studies, and that led him to studying neuroscience. But he was always very interested in the sort of crossover between the philosophy and the medicine, and I think that was really interesting to read about. He also cross-references a load of literature in this book. Throughout, he kind of goes back to the literature that he loved when he first started studying, so I think this is a good one for book lovers. And he also doesn't just talk about his illness, he talks about his general experiences as a neuroscientist, and mixes those in with his own cancer effectively. Obviously it's unfinished because his illness, when he was diagnosed, they didn't really know. They thought he might have another 5 or 7 years to live, and that didn't happen. I think from diagnosis to death it was only 22 months. So he was obviously writing this book when his suddenly got a lot worse. So it is not complete, but they've managed to find a cut-off point where it kind of makes sense for it to finish. And it's kind of touching because Paul and his wife decided to have a baby during his illness, because they didn't know how long he was going to live, and that kind of becomes a central focus in terms of the death and the life situation at the end of the book. Difficult read, and I don't know that it's something that I would want to revisit necessarily, but I'm really glad that I read it. I think it's definitely worth reading, and it kind of even though it is sad, it puts hope in things as well, and Paul very much faced his death head on. He was very pragmatic about what was going to happen to him, and yeah, I would recommend it. It's hard, but I would recommend. Then, because I just wanted to add a little something onto the end of this wrap up, I read John Steinbeck's The Vigilante. Is that how you say that word? This is one of the Penguin Modern little booklet things. I really like these. They're £1, so if you go into a bookshop and you're like me, you have to buy something. Normally, actually, I have to buy 2 things because I like my books to come in pairs. Don't ask, don't ask. But anyway, these are fantastic for if you really can't justify spending 2 books worth of money, because they are just £1 and you can just pick them up and have a quick read. They're also fantastic for trying out authors, I think. Obviously, John Steinbeck is one of my faves already. These are 3 little short stories from him, and again, the writing was glorious. I have to say, this is probably my least favourite thing that I have read from John Steinbeck. I don't know that short literature was particularly his forte. I think he's much better with his sweeping sort of generational books, but this was still worth a go. And I think, no, I was going to say I think it would be a good place to start with John Steinbeck, but I don't, because I don't think it would do him justice. But if you're already a Steinbeck fan, it's probably worth a go. So that's everything I read this half of the month. It's not too bad, but it's not too great, but that's okay. Please let me know down below what you've been reading, and I will see you next time. Bye.